I never believed in any of that native folklore stuff. Skinwalkers, shapeshifters, spirits in the woods. It all sounded like something made up to scare kids around a campfire. But what happened to me in the Appalachian Mountains back in 2019 changed everything. You don't forget what you see when you're truly alone. And even years later, I still don't sleep with the window open. I grew up in West Virginia, not far from the border of Kentucky. My uncle owned a small hunting cabin about 6 miles off the main road in the Appalachians. No cell service, no electricity, and the kind of silence you could almost hear. It was more of a shack than a cabin, if I'm being honest. Just 4 walls, a rusted-out stove, and some old military cots. But it was our family's escape. Every October, I'd go up there for a few days to hike, read, and clear my head. No social media, no distractions, just me, the mountains, and the trees. In 2019, I went alone for the first time. My cousin was supposed to come with, but he bailed last minute. I almost canceled, but I told myself I could handle it. I was 28, had done plenty of solo trips before, and knew the area well. Plus, something about those woods always felt peaceful to me, like a place time forgot. But that time, something felt off. The trees were too quiet, and I swear the air felt heavier, like the whole mountain was watching. The first day was uneventful. I unpacked, chopped some firewood, and did a short hike before dark. That night, I cooked some canned chili and read by headlamp. Around midnight, I climbed into my sleeping bag and left the window cracked for air. I don't know how long I was asleep, but something woke me up around 3:30 a.m., a sound I'd never heard before. It was like someone trying to mimic a human voice, but doing a bad job. The tone was weird, too slow and drawn out. It was coming from deep in the woods behind the cabin. At first, I thought it might have been a drunk hiker or a lost hunter, but the words didn't make any sense. It was just repeating one thing over and over again. "Here, boy, here," like it was calling a dog. But it was saying it in a strange, broken way, like a recording played backward. I stayed still, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was just someone messing around. But then I heard movement, something crunching leaves and twigs underfoot. It was slow, deliberate, and getting closer. I turned off my headlamp, sat up, and reached for the hunting knife I kept by my cot. The voice stopped. Dead silence. I waited, barely breathing. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Nothing. Eventually I convinced myself it had to be some kind of animal, maybe a fox mimicking a call. I'd heard they can sound weird sometimes. The next day I shook it off. Went for a longer hike, about 6 miles out toward an old fire tower that had half collapsed years ago. On the way back, I noticed something I'd never seen before. A set of prints just off the trail. Not boots, not shoes. Bare feet. Human feet. But here's the thing, the toes were long. Longer than normal. And the heel print was deep, like whoever made them was heavy or dragging something. I followed them for maybe 20 feet until they vanished into the underbrush. That night, I locked the cabin door. I never bothered with it before. It's not like there were people around, and black bears don't usually mess with cabins unless you leave food out. But something felt wrong. Around 2 a.m., I woke up again. This time it was scratching. Slow, deliberate scraping on the wall near the back window. Not frantic, not random. Like someone or something was drawing shapes with its nails. Then came the voice again. Closer now. "Here, boy, here." But this time, it wasn't just one voice. There were two. Echoing, almost overlapping. Like something was copying itself. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just lay there in the dark, clutching my knife, sweat pooling under my back. I don't know how long it went on. Maybe an hour. Eventually, the sounds faded and I passed out from pure exhaustion. The third night broke me. I was planning to leave at first light anyway. I hadn't slept in 2 days, and I knew whatever was out there wasn't an animal. I packed my gear early and made sure everything was ready to go in the morning. But around 11:45 p.m., I heard footsteps on the porch. Not animals, heavy, deliberate boots on wood. My heart dropped into my stomach. Then came a knock. 1, 2, 3. Slow. Measured. I didn't move. My rifle was across the room, but I wasn't about to make a sound. Then, "Let me in." A man's voice. Deep. Calm. Too calm. Another knock. "I'm hurt. Please." But here's the part that froze me to the bone. the voice was mine. Not similar, it was my exact voice. I don't mean kind of close, I mean pitch perfect. Same accent, same tone. Like someone recorded me and played it back. I sat there in the dark for what felt like an eternity, paralyzed. Then came the sound of something dragging. A long, wet scrape across the door. Then silence. Not even crickets. I stayed up until dawn. When I finally opened the door, there was a smear of blood on the doorknob. A handprint, but it only had 4 fingers. I hiked out that morning without looking back. I didn't stop for water. I didn't stop to rest. I just kept walking until I reached the road and called my cousin from the gas station payphone. He picked me up an hour later. I didn't tell him the full story. Just said I got spooked by something in the woods. That would have been the end of it, except 2 weeks later, I got a voicemail. From an unknown number. No caller ID. The message was just one word, whispered in a low, cracked voice. Here. I deleted it. I changed my number. But every now and then, maybe once a year, I'll get that same call. Same number. Same voice. Same word. I stopped answering. And I've never been back to that cabin. Not once. I don't know what I saw. I don't know what followed me. But I believe now. Not in ghosts, or spirits, or demons. No, I believe there are things in those woods older than our stories. Older than our names. And they're still watching. Before we proceed, please let us know where you're from. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel and be a part of our small community. Let's continue. I still wake up at 3:17 a.m., the exact time my brother's last phone call came through. Sometimes I think I can still hear his voice echoing through the trees when the wind howls just right. They say people vanish in the Appalachian woods all the time, but what happened to Mark wasn't just a disappearance. It was something much darker, something I still can't explain even after all these years. And if I hadn't seen what I saw, I might have gone missing too. My name is Daniel Cooper, and I grew up just outside a small mountain town near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. Our childhood home was less than a 10-minute drive from the Cherokee National Forest, and the forest was like a second home to us. My older brother, Mark, was always the more adventurous one. Where I was cautious and quiet, he was bold and restless, always pushing further down forgotten trails, climbing where others warned not to, and sleeping under the stars even when the weather turned cold. Our bond was unshakable growing up, especially since our dad left early and our mom worked double shifts at the diner. We learned to rely on each other out there, in the silence between the pines. By the time we were adults, Mark had taken a job as a wildlife technician, monitoring deer populations, checking on camera traps, tracking invasive species. He loved it, and honestly, it suited him. I went into teaching, stayed in town, got married. We still kept in touch, and I still joined him for hikes at least a couple times a year. The last one, the one I'm about to tell you about, started just like the others. It was early October, right as the leaves were turning and the temperature dipped enough to smell smoke from distant fireplaces. I thought we were just heading into the woods for a weekend like always. I didn't know it'd be the last time I saw my brother alive. We set out on a Friday afternoon. Mark picked me up in his muddy old Tacoma, tossing me a spare pack as I slid into the passenger seat. "Didn't pack too heavy," he said. "We're not going far this time." He'd found a new section of trail off a service road about 30 minutes deeper than we'd ever gone before. It wasn't on the maps. He found it through some old Forest Service documents and half-legible blog posts. People used to trap out there, he told me. Mostly forgotten now. By the time we reached the turnoff, the cell signal had already dropped. The road narrowed into a gravel path, winding through dense groves of birch and spruce, growing darker even though the sun was still up. We parked where the road faded into forest, shouldered our packs, and started walking. The trail was faint, barely visible. But Mark had a way of spotting details: flattened grass, broken branches, unnatural gaps between trees. "We'll camp near the creek," he said. "It runs parallel to the old trail." We set up camp just before sunset, a small clearing about 20 yards from the water. The cold crept in fast that night. After dinner, we sat by the fire, sipping from a flask and catching up on life. Mark seemed quieter than usual. Not sad exactly, more alert. Like he was listening for something. "You ever hear about those missing 411 cases?" he asked. I laughed. Yeah, you think we're next? He didn't smile. No, just weird stuff. Patterns. People go missing in clusters. Same regions. Same types of people. You're not helping, man. He stared past the fire. I found something last time I was out here. I paused. Like what? He hesitated, then reached into his pack and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, I leaned forward. It was a charm or pendant, a strange piece of metal, shaped like a circle with jagged edges, almost like a sunburst. It looked handmade, old, and burnt. Where'd you find that? Buried in a hollow tree, with bones. I wanted to laugh again, but something about his voice stopped me. It wasn't a joke. He wrapped it back up. Let's crash early, he said. I want to check something in the morning. I couldn't sleep that night. There were noises, too rhythmic to be wind, too light to be animals. Leaves crunching in short bursts, then silence. I thought maybe it was my imagination until I saw Mark get up, barefoot, and walk toward the trees. Mark? I hissed. He didn't answer. Just walked. I jumped up and followed him with a flashlight, my boots barely tied. He was already 10 yards ahead, heading down the trail without turning back. When I caught up, I grabbed his arm. He was ice cold. What the hell are you doing? He blinked, like he didn't recognize me at first. Then his eyes cleared. I thought I heard something. A voice. We went back to camp in silence. But I didn't sleep again. The next morning was cold and gray, with a damp mist hanging low over the forest floor. Mark was already up, brewing coffee over the fire. He looked tired, paler than usual, dark circles under his eyes. I didn't ask if he remembered the night before. I could tell he did, but neither of us said anything. By mid-morning, we were hiking again, deeper along the faint trail. The air smelled different, older somehow. Moldy wet. The trees seemed denser. No birds, no wind. Just the crunch of our boots and the occasional snap of a distant twig that neither of us wanted to mention. After maybe an hour and a half, Mark stopped. Here, he said, and knelt beside a hollowed-out stump. He pulled on a pair of gloves and carefully started digging through the damp leaves inside. I stayed back, watching him work. The deeper he dug, the more intense the smell became, something between mildew and decay. He paused, then reached down with both hands and lifted something out. It was another charm, identical to the one he'd shown me the night before, only this one was blackened all the way through, burnt to a crisp, like it had been held in fire for hours. When he turned it over, there were tiny symbols etched on the back, circles with intersecting lines, and what looked like a star made from uneven points. What is that? I asked. He didn't answer, just kept staring at it like he was trying to remember something, or forget something. We didn't talk much on the hike back. Mark wrapped the charm in a bandana and shoved it deep into his pack. But his mood changed. He became twitchy. He kept checking behind us like he expected someone, or something, to follow. That night, everything felt wrong. It started with the sound of footsteps crunching near the creek. We both froze. Mark grabbed his flashlight and aimed it toward the noise. There was nothing there, just mist curling above the water. Then something whistled. A high, shrill note, like someone calling a dog, but distorted. Too slow. Too long. Mark stood up fast. It's time to go, he said. Now. What? It's dark. We're not staying another night. I didn't argue. We started packing fast. But then his phone buzzed. No signal. No bars. And yet a message had come through. He stared at it, and I could see the blood drain from his face. What? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. It just said, leave it. Nothing else. No number. No contact. We left. No campfire. No talking. We hiked in silence with headlamps cutting through the mist. But the trail had shifted. I swear it. The same trees we passed hours earlier now felt unfamiliar, like we'd been rerouted. Twice we ended up back at the creek. We started marking trees with my pocket knife, but the marks vanished within an hour. Something was playing with us, and then Mark vanished. It happened too fast. I looked down for 1 second, just one, and when I looked up, he was gone. No scream, no rustle, just gone. I ran, yelling his name. I tore through brush, scraping my arms, cutting my legs. I screamed until my throat burned. I didn't care about bears or cliffs or getting lost. I had to find him. I never did. I don't remember falling. But I must have, because when I opened my eyes, I was flat on my back, staring up at treetops that swirled like shadows. The woods were silent. And I mean silent. Not just quiet. Not a bird, not a bug, not even wind. The kind of silence that presses against your skull like a scream held in a vacuum. I sat up, dizzy, and realized I was somewhere else entirely. Not the trail. Not near the creek. The trees here were thicker, gnarled like arthritic fingers. The ground was soft and dark, not dirt, but ash. I saw it then, the structure. A crude arrangement of wood and bone, built into the base of a massive dead tree. It wasn't a cabin. It wasn't even shelter. It looked more like an altar. There were more charms, dozens of them, hanging from the branches with string made of. I don't want to say it, but it wasn't rope. And something else was there. Not someone. Something. A figure, crouched low in the ash, moving in slow, rhythmic gestures, almost like it was praying, or mimicking prayer. It was covered in a filthy cloak, its arms too long, the fingers moving like broken twigs in the wind. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. It turned its head toward me, slowly, without standing. It didn't have a face. Just dark skin stretched too tightly over the bone, with no eyes, no mouth, just shapes. Hollow impressions where features should be. And even though it didn't speak, I felt something in my mind, like static being forced into my thoughts. Words that weren't in a voice, but in sensation. Leave him. Leave it. Go. And behind the creature, I saw Mark. He was kneeling in the ash, facing the altar, unmoving. His eyes were open, glassy, and he wasn't blinking. Like something had hollowed him out and filled him with dust. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to grab him, scream at him, fight for him. But I couldn't move. The next thing I remember, it was morning. I was lying on the gravel road beside Mark's truck. My pack was gone. My knife was gone. My brother was gone. The Rangers searched for 6 weeks. Dogs, drones, helicopters, hundreds of volunteers. They found our campsite. They found one of the charms hanging from a branch near the creek. They never found Mark. They didn't find the altar, or the ash field, or the thing with no face. At least, not that they told me. When I told them what happened, they chalked it up to trauma. Said I must have hit my head, imagined things. That Mark probably got lost, maybe fell, maybe worse. But I knew what I saw. They took the charm for analysis. I followed up a month later. They claimed it was organic metal, origin unknown. And then they stopped returning my calls. I started seeing the symbol again. In dreams, on walls, even in a sticker on a telephone pole near my apartment. The same jagged circle. Same uneven star. I can't prove anything. I have no evidence. No photos. No video. Just this story. But here's what I know. There are places in those woods that don't belong to us. Places that bend the rules. Places that remember. And Mark is still out there. I feel it sometimes. Like he's still kneeling, staring at that altar, waiting for someone to break the silence. Or worse, becoming part of it. So if you ever hear a whistle in the woods, one long, drawn-out note that sounds almost human, don't follow it. And if you find something buried in a tree that was never meant to be seen, put it back. I didn't tell anyone right away. After I was found on the gravel road, the Rangers took me to the station in Townsend. A medic checked me over, mild dehydration, scrapes, a mild concussion, but I refused the hospital. I just wanted to go home. When they asked what happened, I gave them the safe version. We hiked in, got separated. I fell, lost the trail. When I woke up, I was back at the truck. I knew the minute I mentioned altars or faceless things in the woods, they'd write me off completely. But something gnawed at me, and it wasn't just grief. It was the memory of Mark's face that night by the fire. The way he looked when he said he found something. Like he knew. Like he'd been waiting for it to find him. Back home, my wife tried to be supportive. But she didn't know how to deal with the silence I carried with me. I wasn't sleeping. Couldn't focus. I'd sit in the dark for hours, just listening for that whistle. Sometimes I thought I heard it through the trees behind our house, always too faint to be sure. 3 weeks after the incident, I started digging through Mark's things. He lived alone in a cabin near the edge of the forest. It was simple, with stove, hunting gear, old books and maps scattered everywhere. I hadn't been there in over a year. The place was still as he left it. 2 mugs on the counter. Jacket draped over the back of a chair. his bed made with military precision. But there was something else, a box shoved under his bed, locked with a cheap padlock. I cracked it open with a bolt cutter from his shed. Inside was a mess of notes, sketches, and photos. All of it centered around a section of the forest he'd labeled Old Widow's Hollow. I'd never heard of it. The name didn't show up on any official trail maps, but in his notes, it appeared over and over again. Circled, underlined, accompanied by strange symbols, jagged suns, crude stick figures kneeling, trees with eyes drawn into their bark. One photo showed a rotted animal carcass laid in a perfect spiral. Another showed the charm, the same one he'd unwrapped for me, nailed to a tree. But it was one page that stopped me cold. It was a journal entry. His handwriting was rough, fast. September 2nd. I heard it again. The whistle. One long, one short. No birds when it happens. Like the forest is holding its breath. I followed it today. I know I shouldn't have. It wasn't a person. I saw it move between the trees. It doesn't walk right. And it doesn't cast a shadow. I don't think it's tied to a place. I think it follows the charms. They're not protective. They're invitations. Another entry from September 9th was worse. I brought something back with me. Not physically, but I feel it now. When I close my eyes. When I wake up with dirt in my nails and don't remember leaving the house. I think it's pulling. Or learning. If I disappear, don't follow. But I had already followed. I'd been pulled in. And now I needed answers. I started asking around town about Old Widow's Hollow. Most people just shrugged. A few older locals gave me strange looks. One guy, an older hunter named Carl, who drank at the VFW hall, muttered something that stuck with me. "You boys poking around that stretch?" he said, eyes narrowing. "Ain't nothing but bones and rot out there. My cousin got turned around there once in the 80s. Came back days later without his shoes or pants. Wouldn't talk for a year. I asked if it was some kind of urban legend. Old Widow hanged herself in them woods back in 1910, he said. They say she buried her husband out there too. But it ain't her you gotta worry about." "Then who?" I asked. He just shook his head. "Not who. What?" The next morning, I packed my bag. I told my wife I was going hiking. She begged me not to go alone. So I lied, told her I'd meet a buddy up by Cades Cove. But I knew I had to go back there. Not for closure. Not even to find Mark anymore. I just needed to know why. The trailhead felt different this time. I knew where I was going. I'd mapped out the likely location of Widow's Hollow based on Mark's notes. It was about 5 miles past where we camped, near a stretch where the trees grew tightly together, roots tangled like veins underfoot. By dusk, I reached the creek. The campsite was gone. The fire ring, the logs we dragged over, even the stones we stacked to mark the path, all gone. The ground looked untouched, like we'd never been there. I pushed on, following Mark's makeshift trail markers scratched into the bark. The further I went, the worse the forest smelled. A mixture of wet moss and something sour. I started seeing animal bones, not full skeletons, just fragments. A jawbone here, a cracked femur there, arranged deliberately. Then came the silence. It hit like a wall. 1 second there were bugs, birds, my own crunching footsteps. Then nothing. I froze. Then came the whistle. Long. Short. My chest tightened. My brain screamed to turn around, but my legs moved forward, slow and stupid. I crested a small ridge and saw it again. The altar. Same as before, maybe bigger. Maybe just clearer. Bones and sticks shaped into symbols. The ash was deeper, darker. And in the center, where Mark had knelt, someone else now stood. Or something. It was turned away from me, taller than before. Its limbs wrong, too thin. Its head bent low like it was praying or sniffing the ash. My flashlight flickered. The thing froze, then turned its head halfway, not fully. No face, just that smooth, skin-covered skull, puckered like clay stretched too thin. My light flickered again, then died completely. Darkness swallowed me, and in that dark, I heard breathing, inches from my ear. I don't remember hitting the ground, but when I opened my eyes, I was flat on my stomach. The forest was quiet, not just soundless, but still. The air had that dense, damp pressure you feel right before a thunderstorm. I reached for my flashlight, dead. My phone wouldn't turn on either. The battery wasn't drained. It was just off, like everything else out here. I should have run. I should have left. But something held me in place, something deeper than fear. There's a kind of knowing that lives in your bones when you're too far from help, too far from logic. That's what I felt. And that's what made me crawl forward toward the altar again. It was slightly different this time, more complex. There were now 5 charms instead of 1, arranged in a tight circle around the ash pit. One of them had fresh blood on it. Not dry, not animal, red and sticky. I don't know what came over me, but I reached down and picked it up. The second I touched it, my ears rang like a bomb had gone off. And then I heard his voice. Daniel. Soft. Too soft. I jerked my head up and saw him. Mark. He stood just beyond the tree-line, 20 feet away, partially cloaked in shadows. He looked thinner, dirty, but alive. Mark! I ran toward him. He didn't move, didn't flinch. As I got closer, I saw his eyes, wide, glassy, and unmoving. But he was smiling. Not a happy smile. Not relief. It was rehearsed. Like he'd forgotten what emotions were supposed to look like, and was mimicking one. I slowed to a walk. Mark? Are you hurt? Still no blink. No response. Just that weird, crooked smile. And then in perfect sync, he lifted both arms, not slowly, not naturally, but like a puppet being pulled upward by invisible strings. Behind him, the forest shifted. Branches groaned. Leaves crackled in the absence of wind. And from between the trees stepped more people. I say people, but they weren't right. There were maybe a dozen of them, all barefoot, clothes tattered, skin pale and raw like they'd been soaked in water for too long. They walked with a strange cadence, not dragging their feet, but stepping deliberately, like they were performing some kind of ceremony. Each one of them carried a charm, some larger, some rusted. One of them had a rib cage slung over their shoulder like a satchel. Another had bones woven into their hair. I backed away slowly. Mark's head tilted sideways, almost 90 degrees, like his neck wasn't built with bones anymore. He opened his mouth, and a sound came out, not a voice. A whistle. The rest of them joined in, echoing the sound, forming a rhythmic pattern that pulsed in my ears like it was inside my skull. I dropped the charm and ran. I don't know how far I ran or how long. I just remember crashing through trees, tripping over roots, and scraping my arms raw on bark and branches. I ran until my lungs felt like they were filling with sand. I ran until my legs gave out. Eventually, I collapsed near a small ravine. I curled into the undergrowth, shaking and gasping. I stayed there until the sky started to lighten with dawn. And that's when I heard it again, soft steps, not far behind me. But this time, it wasn't Mark. It was a child, or something that looked like one. It stood no more than 4 feet tall. Long black hair. No shoes. A burlap sack dress that looked stitched together from different kinds of cloth. Its hands were too long. Its eyes were too wide. But worst of all, it didn't blink. It stood there, tilting its head like it was studying me. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. I was paralyzed. Then it opened its mouth. I expected a voice, or maybe that same horrible whistle. But instead it sang. A soft, tuneless lullaby. The kind you hear in dreams. Or nightmares. I don't remember falling asleep. But when I woke up, the child was gone. And so was my bag. My compass, my food, my water. All gone. Except for one thing, my brother's journal. It was lying next to me, open to the final page. But the handwriting wasn't Mark's anymore. It was neater, older, slanted, like it had been written with a quill. You came back. That was your mistake. You were given a warning. You ignored it. He is part of us now. You are not. Yet. There was something else. Etched into the edge of the page, carved in, not written, was the same symbol I'd seen on the charms. The jagged sunburst with the uneven star inside. Below it, scratched in smaller letters. The forest remembers who listens. And who doesn't. I wanted to scream. But the forest didn't care. It never had. I followed the ravine for hours, until I found a deer trail. Then a muddy boot print. And finally, around dusk, a hunting shack, unlocked, abandoned, with a radio mounted to the wall. The signal was weak, but I got through. By morning, a search party reached me. They said I'd been gone 6 days. They didn't believe me. They nodded politely as I told them where I'd been, how I found the altar, saw Mark again. One of the rangers even took notes. But the moment I said the word faceless, their expressions shifted. Not angry. Not cruel, just tired, like they'd heard it before, or worse, like they hadn't and didn't want to. They offered to take me back in with a guided team. I said no. The search was called off 10 days later. No sign of Mark. No evidence. No footprints. No blood. Just a torn strap from his pack caught on a branch 2 miles off the main trail. As far as the state was concerned, he was a missing person. Presumed dead. I was the only one who knew better. Life didn't return to normal. How could it? I'd always thought of grief as a weight, something that presses on your chest. But this wasn't grief, not just. It was more like a fracture in my reality. Something had snapped open inside me. Something that couldn't be stitched closed. My wife tried. For a while. She sat with me during the quiet nights, listened when I told her the same story a dozen times. But eventually, she stopped asking questions. And then one night, she packed a bag and stayed with her sister for a few days. She never came back. I didn't blame her. Sometimes I wished I could leave too. But the forest had followed me home. It started with the smell. At first, I thought it was mildew, then sulfur, then both like rotting leaves steeped in something sour. I cleaned the house top to bottom, called a plumber, an electrician. No leaks, no mold, no issues. Then the dreams came, always the same. I'd be standing in front of the altar again, holding one of those charms, and Mark would be across from me, smiling that lifeless smile. But every night, he'd be closer. In one dream, I saw his mouth move. I didn't hear words. I heard the whistle. I woke up shaking, drenched in sweat. The smell lingered. So I did what I swore I wouldn't do. I went back. Not into the forest, not yet. I returned to Mark's cabin. It had been untouched since the search ended. Dust thick on every surface. Dead bugs in the windowsills. But the air in there was clean, safe. I searched again, this time more carefully. And I found something. Not in the journal, not under the bed. It was inside a hollowed-out book on the shelf, wedged between 2 volumes on Cherokee mythology. A cassette tape, labeled only with a date, September 27th. I didn't even own a player, but an antique store in town sold me one for $12. That night, I sat alone and pressed play. The first minute was static. Then Mark's voice. If you're hearing this, I guess I didn't come back. My throat tightened. I followed it again today. I know I shouldn't have. But I had to see how far it went. It's not a creature, Dan. It's a system. A ritual. A place that moves. That calls. The charms aren't protection. They're permission. Something ancient lives out here. Not a spirit. Not a god. Something outside the way we understand time. I think it's always been here. Watching. He paused. The sound of breathing. It's been using me. Using all of us. We come here thinking we're exploring. But really we're offering. I don't know if I'll have the strength to leave next time. If I disappear, don't look for me. Don't try to save me. Another pause. A different tone now. Urgent. And if you hear it whistle, long, short, long run. Don't stop. Don't speak. Don't turn around. The tape clicked off. I sat in silence for nearly an hour. That night, I heard the whistle outside my house. Not in a dream. Outside. By the trillium. I turned off every light, locked every door, sat on the floor with a knife in one hand and Mark's journal in the other. The sound came again. Then footsteps. Crunching through dry leaves. Soft. Deliberate. I didn't sleep. In the morning, there were footprints in the dirt just outside the kitchen window. Barefoot. And next to them, a charm. Just like the one from the altar. Only this time, it had my name carved into the back. I moved away 2 weeks later. Sold the house. Quit my job. Left behind everything. I live in a small apartment now, hundreds of miles from the Appalachian line. No woods nearby. No forest trails. But none of that matters. Because wherever I go, the charm always finds me again. Sometimes it's under my pillow. Sometimes tucked into my mailbox. Once, it was sitting in the passenger seat of my locked car. Always the same. Always with my name. I burn them now. Every time. But they come back. I haven't told anyone this next part. Because even as I say it, I don't believe it. 3 nights ago, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. No name. No number. Just unknown caller. I almost didn't answer. But something told me I had to. I picked it up. Static. then breathing. Then, Mark. Soft. Barely audible. Dan, it's almost done. Don't fight it. I couldn't speak. I tried, but my throat was locked. It doesn't want you yet, but it's coming. Just like it came for me. And then the whistle. Then silence. So that's the story. That's everything. You don't have to believe me. Most people won't. But I'm telling it anyway because I've started seeing things again. Not just in dreams. In mirrors. In windows. In crowds. Mark. Watching me from behind trees that shouldn't be there. And sometimes, in my reflection, I see his smile on my face. If you ever find a charm, a jagged circle with a warped star inside, don't touch it. And if you hear that whistle, even just once, drop everything and run. Because you don't find the forest. It finds you. And once it knows your name, it never forgets. I used to think the scariest thing in the woods was a bear or maybe a bad fall. But that changed in October of 2020, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, when something I still can't explain followed me for nearly 2 days. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't some creature from a campfire story. It was worse because it felt real, like it was watching, waiting, and playing by its own rules. I live in eastern Tennessee, and the mountains have always felt like home to me. I grew up hiking with my dad, fishing in cold streams, and learning how to read the land. By the time I was 30, I knew the southern Appalachian trails like the back of my hand. That year, in the middle of all the COVID madness, I decided to take a solo trip into the backcountry. Just a weekend getaway. No service, no news, no people, just me and the mountains. I chose a remote stretch of forest near the Cherokee National Forest, one of those areas with trails that don't appear on most maps anymore. I'd found an old ranger's topographic chart from the 1980s that showed a primitive route through the woods, marked only by cairns and old boundary markers. It hadn't been maintained in years, which made it even more appealing. I packed light but carefully: tent, sleeping bag, food, compass, knife, water purifier, the essentials. I signed in at the ranger station and started my hike early Friday morning, expecting to be back by Sunday evening. The first day was peaceful. A little too quiet, maybe, but I chalked that up to being far from popular trails. The air was crisp, the leaves had just started to turn, and the only sound was the steady crunch of my boots on the forest floor. I followed the old trail markers for hours, stopping only to eat and fill my canteen. Around 5 p.m., I found a small clearing and made camp. That night, after I zipped myself into the tent, I heard what I thought was a deer walking nearby. Twigs snapped. Leaves rustled. Normal stuff. I was half asleep when I heard it, a whistle. Not a bird call. Not wind. A human whistle. 2 sharp notes, like someone calling a dog. I sat up instantly, heart racing. I listened hard. The woods went dead quiet. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent, scanning the trees. Nothing. I waited a good 10 minutes before convincing myself it was in my head or some weird animal noise. The next morning, I broke camp early and kept hiking, but the markers started to vanish. The trees looked different. The slope of the hills felt unfamiliar. My compass still pointed north, but the landscape didn't match the map. I came across an old fence line, rusted wire, mostly collapsed, and figured I must be close to the edge of private land. That's when I saw the carving. On the side of a tree, low enough for a child to reach, were 4 letters, D-O-N-T. Not etched with a knife. Scratched deep into the bark like someone clawed it. Below it, on another tree, was one word: look. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of it. Don't look. Was it a warning? A joke? A prank left by hikers? The forest was silent again. As I kept walking, I noticed more trees, each one with more scratches. Sometimes just vertical lines, other times strange symbols. At one point, I found a pile of stones, stacked like a small tower, maybe 4 feet high, with a deer skull resting on top. The skull had no antlers, but the eye sockets looked fresh. Clean. Like it hadn't been out there long. That's when the smell hit me. Rot. Wet fur. Blood. I turned around and started walking fast, not running, but fast enough to feel panic creeping up my spine. The trail behind me was gone, no markers, no footprints. I was alone. Worse than alone, I felt like I was being watched. By late afternoon, I found a small cave, really more of an overhang of rock, and decided to wait out the night there. I didn't want to be moving through those woods in the dark. I set up my gear, ate in silence, and kept my flashlight close. Around 10:30 p.m., the whistling came back. 2 notes. Slow. Deliberate. Wee-hoo. Then again closer. Then again, too close. I turned off my light and pressed my back against the cave wall. No movement. No sound. Just darkness. Then footsteps. They were soft. Careful. Like whoever, or whatever, it was didn't want to scare me. That was worse. The footsteps stopped just outside the cave. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. The forest was so quiet. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Then came a voice. Are you alone? It was flat. No emotion. No accent. Just wrong. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The voice came again. This time from a different spot, as if it had moved 10 feet instantly. I used to be alone too. That's when I saw it, a shape. Not clearly, just a silhouette against the edge of the tree line. It was standing wrong. Legs too long, neck tilted like it was broken. I shut my eyes tight and didn't open them until daylight. When I finally looked out, there was nothing. No footprints. No signs of anyone being there. But the pile of stones I'd passed earlier, it was now 10 feet from the cave entrance. Same stack. Same skull. Moved without a sound. I didn't eat. Didn't even pack properly. I just started walking. Any direction. I knew my compass wouldn't help, but I had to move. For hours I scrambled over rocks and fallen trees, through streams and thickets. My legs bled. My lips cracked. Every time I stopped to breathe, I felt eyes on me. The trees watched. Then in the early afternoon, I heard something familiar, an engine. I sprinted uphill toward the sound and stumbled onto a dirt road. A group of off-roaders were parked there, taking a break. I must have looked feral. One of them gave me water and a ride back to my truck. When I told the ranger what happened, he looked me dead in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. You didn't see it, did you? I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head and muttered, Good. That means it's not done with you yet. To this day, I don't hike alone. I barely even camp. Sometimes I hear whistling when I'm walking my dog at night. 2 notes. Faint. Familiar. Wee-hoo. I try not to look, because maybe, just maybe, that's all it wants me to do. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I spend most weekends hiking the Appalachian backcountry. It's peaceful, quiet, and has this strange way of resetting my brain after a long week. I'd done most of the popular trails in the area, so I started looking into less traveled routes. A ranger I'd met during a volunteer cleanup project mentioned an old fire access trail near Waya Bald that hadn't been maintained in years. It wasn't on the official maps anymore, but if I was comfortable going off-grid, he said, it'd give me some of the best mountain views in the state. I planned a 2-day solo hike, not super far, maybe 20 miles round trip. I packed light but brought all the essentials, map, water purifier, emergency beacon, knife, and my old .38 just in case. I parked at the last marked trailhead and bushwhacked west into the hills with a printed satellite map. The air smelled like pine and moss, and the only sounds were birds and the crunch of leaves under my boots. It felt exactly how I wanted it to feel, until it didn't. By mid-afternoon, I'd gone farther than expected and hadn't seen a single soul. The trail was overgrown but still recognizable. Flat rocks arranged like steps, old wooden trail markers half-rotted and leaning. Around 3:30 p.m., I stopped to drink some water and check my bearings. That's when I noticed the silence. Like real silence. No birds. No wind. No distant sounds of planes overhead. Just me and my breathing. I stood still for a while waiting for something, a squirrel, a leaf rustle, anything. But the woods were completely still. I shrugged it off, figuring I had just startled the wildlife. An hour later, I came across something that stopped me cold, an old tent. Collapsed and half covered in vines. Faded green nylon, torn at the seams, with rusted poles sticking out like broken bones. It looked like it had been there for years. Nearby, there was a rotted sleeping bag and a crushed metal pot. No sign of people, no fire pit, no gear. Just abandoned. I should have turned back then. I know that now. Instead, I took a few photos, thinking I'd report it when I got back. I marked the location on my phone's offline GPS and kept moving, but I couldn't shake the unease. That strange silence followed me for the next 2 miles, like I was walking underwater. My skin crawled for no reason. I made camp on a small ridge with decent visibility, ate a protein bar, boiled water, and tried to settle in. But something was off. I kept hearing what sounded like footsteps, crunch, pause, crunch, coming from the slope below, always just out of sight. When I called out, it stopped. Every time. Not scattering like an animal would. Just freezing. That night I barely slept. Every sound made my heart race. I thought I saw a figure standing between the trees at one point, just a shadow. But when I shined my light, there was nothing. At dawn, I packed up and started heading back. I followed the same route, but after about 20 minutes, I realized something was wrong. The rock formations I passed didn't look familiar. The trail was winding in the wrong direction. I checked my phone. The GPS still had me on the route, but the trees were different. The ground was softer. Something wasn't right. By noon, I knew I was lost. And that's when I found the second camp. This one was worse. A single moldy boot, half buried in dirt. A torn flannel shirt. A rusted thermos, with initials scratched into the metal, RS. I froze. It looked like whoever had been there left in a hurry, or never left at all. I turned around and started moving fast. I stopped using the GPS and just followed the sun east, hoping I'd eventually intersect the main trail again. But the woods weren't letting go. Every direction looked the same: dense trees, moss-covered rocks, steep ridges. The silence was back, and now it felt personal. Around 4 p.m., I came to a small clearing with a large boulder in the middle. Sitting on top of it was a stone pile, neatly stacked, about 4 feet tall, balanced too perfectly to be natural. As I walked past it, I saw something carved into the flat side of the rock. Not alone. I spun around, heart racing, scanning the woods. Nothing moved. But I swear, I could feel eyes on me. My chest tightened, and every hair on my neck stood up. That night I didn't set up camp. I just kept walking. I didn't care about direction anymore. I just needed to move. Around 9:30 p.m., with my flashlight nearly dead, I found an old Forest Service shack. One room, rotting wood, busted door, but shelter. I went inside and locked the door with some rope from my bag, sat in the corner, and tried to breathe. It smelled like mildew and ash. I could still feel something watching from outside. Then I heard it again. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Right outside the door. I held my breath. Silence. Then 3 slow knocks. On the wood. Right next to my head. Not on the door, on the wall behind me. I didn't move. Another knock. Lower this time. Like someone crouching. Then whispering. Not words. Just noise. Like breath moving through clenched teeth. Almost angry. I stayed completely still until sunrise. When morning came, I opened the door and ran. Didn't eat, didn't check the map, just ran. I eventually found an old forest road around noon, flagged down a fire truck, and collapsed. The rangers didn't believe me. They said I probably got turned around and had a panic episode, but one older guy pulled me aside before I left. He asked if I'd seen any stacked rocks. I said yes. He didn't say anything else. Just nodded and walked away. Back home, I did some digging. Found an old article from 1998. A couple went missing while hiking a similar route near Wyabald. No bodies were ever found. Just a tent, collapsed, and a stone pile with their initials carved into it. RS and ML. I don't hike alone anymore, and I never go west of Asheville. Whatever is out there, it doesn't want to be found. But it does watch, and if you go too far off the trail in the Appalachian Mountains, you might not come back. I never believed the stories about Appalachia until the night I found myself stuck deep within it. I was just trying to save a little time on my drive, a shortcut through the hills, that's all. But those winding roads led me somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Somewhere no GPS could explain, and no map dared show. I made it out, but I left a part of myself behind. It was October of last year. I was driving from Charleston, West Virginia to Knoxville, Tennessee after visiting my cousin for his wedding. I'd stayed later than I planned, too many toasts, too many stories, and by the time I was back on the road, it was close to 10 p.m. I was supposed to take I-77 south to I-81, but a traffic alert pinged my phone just before I got on the highway. A wreck, 2-hour delay. I sighed and pulled off into a gas station to regroup. While grabbing coffee, I overheard a guy at the counter telling the cashier about an old state road, Route 31, that cut through the edge of the Appalachians and bypassed the interstate. Locals use it all the time, he said. Saves you an hour. I didn't think much of it, but after plugging the coordinates into my GPS and seeing it line up, I figured why not? Just me, my truck, and some good music. What could go wrong? The first 20 miles were easy enough. The road curved through sleepy farmland, dotted with rundown barns and mailboxes that hadn't seen paint in decades. I rolled the window down to feel the breeze. It was cool and still, the kind of air that makes your skin feel too quiet. By mile 30, things started to feel off. My GPS began lagging, then froze. I tried restarting the app, but it kept buffering. Then my signal disappeared completely. No service. I told myself it was the mountains blocking the reception, but something in my chest tightened. Then I noticed the road signs, or rather, the lack of them. The markings on the road were faded, nearly invisible in my headlights. No towns, no mile markers, no speed limits, just sharp turns and black forest pressing in from both sides. It wasn't like any state-maintained road I'd ever driven on. My headlights seemed to be the only light for miles. Then I passed the first car, or what was left of it. It sat on the shoulder, half buried in leaves and rusted so thoroughly I couldn't even tell the make. It had no tires, and its frame looked almost melted, like it had been sitting there for decades. I slowed down out of instinct, squinting to see if someone was inside. But the windows were completely dark. I kept driving, heart beating a little faster. 10 minutes later, I passed another. This one had a tree growing through the hood. My unease turned into dread when I noticed something in the road up ahead. A figure, standing dead center in my lane. I hit the brakes hard, tires skidding slightly on the gravel shoulder. My high beams caught a man, or what looked like a man. He was wearing a flannel shirt and work pants, standing motionless, arms loose at his sides. I honked. Nothing. I rolled the window down slightly. "Hey, you okay?" He didn't move. Then, without warning, he stepped backward into the tree line and disappeared. Just gone, like he was never there. I floored it. The road narrowed after that, almost like it didn't want me to leave. The trees leaned in, branches occasionally scraping the roof of my truck like fingers. My radio started to pick up weird static, not just fuzz, but low murmurs like someone whispering through the channels. Then the static would snap into silence, and I'd be alone with my breathing and the crunch of my tires on old pavement. It was when I saw the light that I should have turned around. Up ahead, through a break in the trees, there was a small cabin, lit from the inside with a dim yellow glow. Smoke rose from the chimney. I don't know why, but something in me pulled toward it. Maybe it was the need to feel human contact, or maybe I was hoping someone could give me directions back to a main road. I pulled into the narrow gravel driveway. There were no other cars. The front door stood slightly open, creaking just a little as the wind nudged it. I called out from the truck, "Hello? Anyone home?" No answer. I should have left. But instead, I walked to the porch, knocked twice on the doorframe. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the photographs. Dozens of them, tacked to the inside walls, barely lit by the flickering bulb overhead. Faces. People. All of them looking directly at the camera. All of them with the same hollow, empty stare. And in several of them, the background matched the road I'd just driven, including one with a rusted truck that looked eerily like mine. I turned to leave, my heart pounding. The porch creaked under my boots as I stepped back, eyes darting to the trees. That's when I heard it, crunching footsteps on dry leaves, coming from behind the house. Then another, and another, more than one set. I backed away slowly. The forest felt alive, not in the peaceful, nature is beautiful kind of way. More like something had been waiting for me, watching me, luring me. I sprinted to my truck, yanked the door open, and slammed it shut. Just as I locked it, something moved in the rearview mirror, a blur, dashing across the edge of the driveway. I jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine sputtered. Again. It sputtered again. My fingers were slick with sweat as I turned the key over and over, finally roaring to life. The headlights flicked on, and illuminated a figure directly in front of me. It was the man from earlier. Same flannel shirt, same blank stare. Only now his face was wrong. His mouth was stretched too wide, his eyes too still. Like someone was wearing a person's skin and hadn't figured out how to move it right. I threw the truck into reverse, tires kicking up gravel, and peeled backward down the driveway. I hit the road hard and took a sharp right, my headlights bouncing off the trees. As I picked up speed, I saw movement along the road, figures emerging from the woods, just barely visible in the periphery. They didn't chase me. They didn't need to, because for a solid 10 minutes, no matter how fast I drove, the road refused to end. The curves repeated. The trees looked identical. At one point, I passed a rusted-out car I'd already seen. Twice. Eventually, the road just changed. Without warning, the trees opened up, and I burst out onto a paved county road. Self-service returned with a ding. My GPS lit back up, reorienting itself. I looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was gone. Not like it disappeared into the trees. I mean literally gone. Where the gravel lane had been, there was just tall grass and wildflowers. No sign of a road, no sign of the cabin, no tire tracks. I drove another hour until I hit the outskirts of a small town. I stopped at a diner, walked in shaking, and sat at the counter. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, poured me a coffee without a word. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said after a moment. I asked her if she'd ever heard of Route 31. Her expression changed instantly, like I'd said something foul. "Where'd you hear about that?" I told her about the man at the gas station. "There ain't no Route 31 anymore," she said quietly. "Got shut down in '89 after a landslide took out half the mountain. Folks used to take it when they wanted to disappear. Some came back. Most didn't." I asked her what she meant. She just shook her head. "You're lucky you did. To this day, I can't find that road again. Not on a map, not on satellite, not even driving the same path again. It's like it never existed. But I know what I saw. I know where I went. And I know deep down that something out there was waiting for me. Still is." My name's Nathan. I grew up in Tennessee, but I've lived all over the Southeast, West Virginia, North Carolina, Kentucky. My younger brother, Kyle, and I were always close. We didn't have a big family, so we looked out for each other. After our mom passed in 2020, we decided to reconnect and take a camping trip in the Smokies, right along the edge of the Appalachian Trail. He'd gotten really into hiking, and I figured some quiet time in the woods would do us both some good. I wished to God we'd never gone. We planned to stay out 3 nights, hiking a loop that wasn't too far off the beaten path, nothing hardcore. Kyle had mapped out the trail himself, but we both agreed we wanted one night in total seclusion, no campsites, just wilderness. He found a side path up near an old fire road that hadn't been used in years. That's where we set up our second camp, higher elevation, with a perfect view of the ridgeline. No signs of people, just trees and rock and sky. It felt peaceful. That night changed everything. The first day was normal. We hiked about 10 miles, set up our tent by a shallow stream, cooked dinner on the portable stove, and sat by a small fire as the sky turned dark. Around 10 p.m., we turned in. I woke up sometime after midnight to pee. I stepped out of the tent, groggy, and walked a few feet toward the trees. That's when I heard it, a sharp snap like a thick branch breaking. Then silence. I held my breath, listening. Maybe a deer. But something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the snap. It was what came after. The woods were too quiet. No insects, no wind. Just heavy stillness. The next morning, Kyle asked if I'd heard anything weird. I played it off, but he admitted something spooked him too. He said he'd felt like someone was walking around our tent, slow, deliberate steps. I joked that it was probably a raccoon or bear, but he didn't laugh. We packed up and made our way to the old fire road Kyle had marked. It took longer than we thought, and the terrain got rougher the higher we climbed. By the time we found a flat clearing to pitch our tent, the sun was already setting. We were both exhausted. No service, no reception, and no other people for miles. Just the mountains. That night, everything went to hell. Around 2 a.m., I woke up again, not because I needed to pee, but because I felt watched. It's hard to describe. It was like something was just outside the tent, breathing through the fabric. Not touching it, not moving, just there. I nudged Kyle. "Do you hear that?" He nodded without a word. Then came the sound, soft at first. A high-pitched whistle. Not a melody, just one long, steady note. Like someone blowing through cracked lips. It was maybe 30 feet away. Then, slowly, another whistle joined in, farther back. Then another. 3 total. We sat frozen in our sleeping bags, barely breathing. Then, footsteps. Not one set. Multiple. Moving slowly around the tent, circling. Leaves crunching, twigs snapping. The whistling stopped. I reached for my flashlight and clicked it on. No shadows through the fabric. Just empty darkness outside. Then we heard a voice. It wasn't loud, and it didn't come from close by. It sounded like it was drifting through the trees, male, low, and broken. Like someone with a crushed throat was trying to speak. "Don't run." My heart slammed into my ribs. Kyle grabbed my arm. His eyes were wide, and I could tell he was on the edge of panic. I wanted to unzip the tent and bolt, but that voice, that thing, it felt like it was inside my head. Like it knew we were afraid. Like it wanted us to be. Then silence again. Total silence. For what felt like hours. Eventually we must have fallen asleep, or maybe passed out from fear. The next thing I remember is waking up to weak sunlight filtering through the nylon. The forest looked normal. Birds chirping. Leaves rustling in the breeze. But just 10 feet from our tent was a circle of stacked stones. Perfectly shaped, about waist high. And sitting on top was Kyle's pocket knife. Clean. Closed. Placed neatly. He hadn't touched it since the day before. We broke camp in under 10 minutes, barely speaking. We didn't eat, didn't fill our bottles. Just packed and moved. Kyle took the lead, following the GPS on his watch, trying to get us back to the main trail. But the trail wasn't there. We walked for hours, retracing our steps, trying different routes, checking landmarks. But everything felt unfamiliar. The terrain seemed to shift, like the forest was looping in on itself. Trees we'd passed before reappeared. Dead logs we stepped over earlier now looked freshly broken. Around mid-afternoon, we heard the whistles again. Closer now. One ahead, one behind. The third to the left. Always 3. We ran. Branches slapped our faces, rocks tore up our boots. I tripped twice and felt blood running down my leg, but I didn't stop. We heard the footsteps again, faster now. The kind of sound people make when they're running barefoot on dry leaves. Then ahead, a clearing. We sprinted into it, lungs burning, and stopped cold. It was the same clearing where we had camped the night before. Same exact one. The stone circle was still there. But this time, it had 4 stones on top. One of them was my flashlight. We turned to run, but something stepped out of the tree line. It was tall, too tall. Its proportions were off. It had arms, legs, and a face, but none of it looked right. Its skin was pale like ash, stretched tight over bones, and its eyes were wide and glassy, no whites, no pupils. Just milky gray orbs. And it was smiling. It didn't chase us. It just raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and pointed. Behind us. We didn't turn around. We ran again, blindly this time, crashing through brush and briars. I don't know how long we ran, but eventually we saw it. A wooden trail marker, weather-worn and cracked. Real. Solid. 15 minutes later, we saw other hikers. Actual people. Families. We didn't say anything to them, just nodded and kept walking until we reached our car. Back at the ranger station, I asked if anyone had reported strange activity near the old fire road. The ranger, a guy in his 60s with sun-leathered skin, got real quiet. He looked around, then said softly, "You boys go up past marker 39? I nodded. He leaned in. "They live up there. Folks that ain't been part of this world for a long time. Some say they were here before the towns, before the settlers, before even the tribes. They don't want much, just to be left alone." I asked what they were. He just said, "Don't let them see you twice." Kyle and I don't talk about it anymore. We haven't hiked together since. He moved back to Florida, and I haven't left the city limits in almost a year. But some nights, especially the quiet ones, I hear it again. That long, steady whistle. And I swear, sometimes, when I wake up around 2 a.m., my flashlight is missing. Only to find it later, sitting on my windowsill.